Good morning, everybody. My name is Luigi Forestieri, and I'm happy to have you here with the rest of the Cryptos team. This workshop will be about how do we classify and how do we protect information as part of a cybersecurity strategy. Today, our agenda looks like this. I'm basically going to be your host, and we'll have a couple of questions that are open for everybody to ask questions whenever they need it. And then we'll have Christian Olsen and Christoph Scheuermann, who would speak about the history of data protection and how a data leak could impact your brand in several different ways. We're also going to be able to calculate some of that impact. We're going to show you some numbers. And at the end, we'll open it up for Q&A and some specific awards that we have for this one. And also, when we close out, there's a bonus material and some other things that we have prepared for you. Speaking a little bit about today's speakers, Ole Christian Olsen, which is our CISO for Cryptos, is a professional with over 10 years of experience in IT, working in information security, risk assessment, and is pretty much knowledgeable on everything related to ISO 27001 and also database management. Christian was born in Norway and has worked as a senior consultant for world-renowned companies like Ernst & Young, Sopra Steria, and ProfitBase. He, as you can see, he has a big amount of certifications. And we also have with us Christoph Scheuermann, our Chief Technology Officer, who has a proven leadership in software development in the financial sector, with over 10 years of experience developing software and being an architect of different groups in various sectors, and also developing large-scale software in the financial sectors, both in the European continent and as well as in the US market. With that in mind, I'm going to turn this now over to Ole Christian Olsen, so he speaks a little bit more about the history of data protection. Christian, good morning, and you can begin.
Okay, thank you for joining. Yeah, I will talk a little bit about the history of data protection and data classification. Data classification is not a new thing, but it's gotten more traction and relevance now in the later years because of the enormous amount of data that we're creating. But data classification and data protection has been around for a long time. And it's the idea of data protection and data classification is not a concept that was conceived by the computer industry, but it was adopted by the computer industry. And for most, the most familiar thing for everyone would probably be the military use. So the military have for a long time used restricted and confidential information to divide who should have access to the different types of or degrees of confidential information. So in the beginning of the computer era, the security threats were not the same as they are today. The biggest threat to confidentiality of information would be unauthorized physical access to a machine. Most computers were not connected to the internet, and those that were connected via a really slow modem, and it was difficult to extract large amount of information. So that's why we also see that the user passwords, for example, they were created sometimes in the 60s and appeared before the first computer virus that was created officially in the 1971 with the creeper virus. And compared to viruses today, the first computer viruses would have been seen as pretty harmless. They were mostly developers showing off their skills to get attention and to say, look how good I am, look what I can do. And what, for example, the first computer virus did was just to print some text to the screen saying, I'm the creeper, catch me if you can. But as computers started getting connected to the internet, the amount of viruses starting to increase and to also spread. If you go back, I'm not there yet. If you go back a slide, so the computer viruses started to spread, and the need to protect your data also increased. But very few people knew anything about cybersecurity in those days. A lot of adult people started working with a computer for their first time, that they had no previous experience, and so they had enough just learning how to operate a computer, and did not have enough knowledge or know how to actually be security aware, and there were no security awareness programs, or at least very few running at that time. So this was when antivirus software first started becoming relevant, and for many people, antivirus software became synonymous with data protection or cybersecurity. If you wanted to protect your data, you needed to install antivirus software. This was also the golden age of the antivirus softwares. Everyone were installing antivirus software as the way to protect their data. But what the antivirus software at that time could do was actually only to protect once you've gotten infected with the virus. And what they did was to scan your drives, looking for signatures of all of known viruses. So it was first later that they started becoming more proactive, scanning entry points like emails, or you could scan your disk before giving access to it. So now you can go to the next slide. So if we look today, cybersecurity and data protection is completely different. It's a lot more complex world out there, and cybercrime is now $1 billion industry, and it's increasing year by year. And if you think cybercrime was a separate economy, it will be among the 5-6 biggest economies in the world, and it's even larger than the global illegal drug trade. And millions of new viruses and malware are created every day, and threat actors now range from advanced persistent threats like nation states and criminal organizations that are capable of producing their own zero-day exploits, to script kiddies who just want to try out some new tool they found. And there's a lot of tools out there. You can buy tools for doing almost all types of hacking. And there's even an operations system, Kali Linux, with all the tools that you need pre-installed. So it's meant for ethical hacking and pen testing, but it can also be used by wannabe hackers to try out a new scheme. So data and documents are also stored now on a plethora of devices, ranging from laptops, file servers, smartphones, pads, cloud environments, and everything in between. And the same document can be copied, multiple copies, and sent to multiple devices and stored in different servers in different continents in a matter of seconds. So it's really important that we start protecting these information assets that we have. It's so easy to copy, it's so easy to spread around. And speaking of documents, we have a lot of documents. We've done tests with cryptos for our clients, and most users have several thousands of documents stored on their local computers. Adding that up with file servers and clouds, you get companies having millions upon millions of documents. And of course, with so much information being processed, we also have regulations coming on board. If you want to process a certain type of information today, whether it be health data, credit card data, personal identifiable information, there's regulations regulating how and if you're allowed to process that data. And there's also a lot of frameworks telling you how can you protect or secure your data in a good way. So you have the frameworks like NIST or SIS security controls or ISO 27001. And if you look at some of the regulations, like for example GDPR in Europe, they will only, when it comes to security, they will only say based on the data that you're processing, the amount of it, and how you're processing it, you should apply the applicable level of information security. And what is the applicable level of information security? Then you may need to go to the frameworks to see what controls and processes should I have in place to protect this data. So next slide. So I wanted to talk a little bit about structured versus unstructured data. Just how much data is structured versus unstructured, it's difficult to say. But some estimates put the relationship at 80% unstructured, 20% structured. And as we can see from this presentation here, structured data, that's what you have in databases. It's structured, you know what you have. It's you have filled out the tables in the database with certain kind of information. It's you know what you have. You know what it is, you can query it, you know if it's regulated or not. If you're not allowed to process a certain type of information anymore, you can easily just anonymize it or get rid of it completely. In comparison, if you have unstructured data, which we can see here is everything else that's not structured, so it's PDFs, it's Word documents, it's spreadsheets, it's text documents, it's presentations, reports, books, newspapers, you name it, everything else that's not structured is unstructured. The thing with unstructured data is you're not sure what you have, and you're not sure where you have it. It can be copied, it can be deleted, it can be put in the file server or in the cloud. It's difficult to have control. You cannot query it. It's difficult to query. You can maybe do a search to see what documents come up, but it's difficult to know what you have, and when you don't know what you have, you don't know if that document should be regulated either. It's also difficult to put a good identity access management in place, because if you have a database or an application that gives access to a database, you can give roles, and have role-based access control. Where a user will have access to those tables in the database, or they will have access to that kind of information. Or when you have a document, you either give access to the document or you don't. You cannot just give limited access to a document. So it's difficult to know what you have, and thereby it's difficult to know what to protect. Unless, of course, you've done data classification, then you know, of course, if it's confidential, you need to have a lot more protection in place compared to a public document. If you do next slide, please. So if we look at data classification, it's actually one of the controls in ISO 27001. If you want to have an information security management system, you need to have done your data classification first. The reason for doing data classification is to know what you have of sensitive data and critical data, and thereby protect the information that is most sensitive and most critical for your company. There are no requirements officially, according to the framework, that how many levels of confidentiality you should have. And there's also no predefined definition per level that you need to relate to. It's up to you or up to each and every organization to define how many levels they want to have and how they define each level. But if you haven't done it already, the most common is to use 4 levels of confidentiality. So it's to use public, internal, restricted, and confidential. And doing data classification for confidentiality, there are 3 main ways of doing it. So if you go to the next slide, we'll take a look at different ways of doing data classification. So you have the manual way by using Regex, or now by using AI. If you go for a manual, it's usually labor intensive. Each and every employee can, for example, classify their documents when they create it, or when they update it or make changes to the document. But it requires a lot of training, to identify what is sensitive information. This is not something that all employees or all users automatically know. So you need to have training. It also gives a low accuracy because people don't agree. If you say a lawyer from the legal department and somebody from marketing, they may have two very different opinions on what is a confidential document and what is a public document, just based on their backgrounds and their interests. And it's also never ending. With thousands of new documents being created every day, you have work for all the eternity in manually classifying documents. Now, you could also hire consultants and experts to help you classify it manually. But again, with maybe millions of documents in the backlog to classify, it will be a huge and costly project. You can also do regex, and what regex does is it looks for certain patterns in a text, and it's really good for finding fixed formats. So if you're looking for credit cards, for example, or a social security number, regex will do the job. But if you're looking for more vague information types, like health information or financial information or personal identifiable information, regex will have more problems. And you also have the setup and adaptation, and looking for lots of different types of information to classify a document, you will also have a lot of false positives using regex. And the last option that we have is the AI, which is now coming. It uses the machine learning to identify what types of information in a document would make that document a public document or an internal, restricted, or confidential. Now, it usually does require an agent installed, either on a file server, cloud, or on a machine. But it can classify millions of documents in a very short time period. It's always on, meaning every time somebody created a new document, that document will be classified in the next run of the AI algorithm. So you can be up to date with all your documents, that all your documents are classified. It's compared to especially the manual version, it will be cost effective. And it's also, AI will also, it will not give you 100% precision because as with manual, there will be different opinions, what makes a document in the different levels. But it will do it the same way every time. So the same document will be classified the same confidentiality level every time by the AI. So that was my part. Now I hand it over to Christoph.
Okay, Christian, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot of letting us know more about data classification and the importance of it. So I'd like to take this a step further and take a little look about what a possible data breach means to a company, how it can affect it, and what impact it has on the business and the brand itself. And there's basically two factors, looking a little at the financial impact, but also the reputational one, which obviously has a long-term effect on the financial situation of a company. So on the next slide, please. The facts I'm going to show is based on a study of the Ponemon Institute called The Impact of Data Breaches on Reputation and Share Value. First fact here, about 549 consumers surveyed, they stated that 62% of these consumers say in the past 2 years, when the study was closed, they have been notified by a company or government agency that the personal information was lost or stolen as a result of a data breach. So this obviously is a huge impact, and the study shows a little the effect on the shareholder value and on the customer loyalty. A little about what the company data was that was actually used for. The next slide, please. So there's 113 publicly traded benchmark companies that were actually used for for the study that have been involved in a data breach with the loss of customer data. And I'd like to dig in, as mentioned before, a little to the financial impact, the direct financial impact on these breaches, concerning revenue loss on average, and also a portfolio of the stock price was created to see what the overall impact was on these two financial factors. So as we can see here, the key takeaway that I like to show here is that all these 113 companies experienced an average stock price decline of 5%. And this happened immediately after the disclosure of the breach, which means obviously a 5% of a decline immediately is a big hit for any company. And concerning the average revenue loss, well, we've got to state here that this figure counts for the companies that have lost more than 5% of their customers. So it was about an average revenue loss of almost $4 million, $3.94 million. So as you can see here, there's an immediate drastic effect on the financial part for a company on any type of data breach. There's an interesting, although logical fact though, that companies were or are less likely to see a decline in stock prices if they have strong security posters. Could be through investments in people, process, and technology. So please, the next slide. And we're taking a look here at 4 different specific cases of these 113 companies. Their names are held confidential, obviously, but the industry sector is being shown. And as you can see there, with the financial service, the stock price decline is almost a third of compared to the other sectors, such as the insurance sector, healthcare sector, or pharma industry. That's not only through the investment in people, process, and technology to attack any type of, to relieve any type of these breaches. It's also about certain regulation entities, for example, in the financial service, the SEC, obviously. But through the investment, it's being shown that these companies that invest more in security and in securing their data, they have a quicker reaction and reaction methods to the breach. And that's actually why they can recover fast and didn't take as much as a hit in the data breach as other sectors can. So that was a little going over real quick about the financial part, but what's not so easy to see and calculate, obviously, is the reputational part for the brand and the company. And this obviously directly influences the long-term scenario for the financial situation of a company as well. So on the next slide, within the study, it shows that the data breach is actually within the top 3 negative effects on brand reputation. It's actually right behind poor customer service and environmental incident. Obviously, environmental incident is something that we usually don't have a lot of control over, and poor customer service is another type of scenario. But taking just a look at the numbers, which are pretty drastic, it sees that this has a serious impact on the relationship between the consumer and the organization. So 65% here actually losing trust in the organization, and up to 31% actually discontinued the relationship with them. So as you can see here, what comes out of this study, that there's a strong difference in perception a company has towards its consumers. So consumers expect a lot more responsibility for safeguarding the personal information that a company has about them than the company is actually willing to assume. And this brings me to some examples I had prepared to show the impact of data breaches. And there's obviously a lot of examples to choose from, and just to show what actually happens when sensitive information becomes public. So I chose 3 cases that are actually from this year. They're not the most famous ones, but I wanted to pick some that illustrate the importance of classifying your data, especially document-based, and what can happen if something leaks out of the company concerning documents. So next slide, please. We have the first company. It's called Advantage Capital Funding. It's a small size financial firm, a little more than 50 employees. But in March this year, almost a 0.5 terabyte of documents containing over 500,000 documents, which were marked as highly sensitive documents, and they include private, legal, and financial files just leaked out into the public. The reason's known here. It's actually quite a common one, which shouldn't be a common, but it is. It's an open database which contained links to unprotected AWS S3 buckets. Unprotected AWS S3 buckets is unfortunately quite a common one to have documents leaked out. The thing I chose this one here because it's actually talking about documents. So the really bad thing about documents leaking is it's not reversible. It's if a company has a breach where user data, let's say usernames and passwords leaked out, you had at least the possibility to, okay, advise your users, please change your passwords. But with documents leaking out containing sensitive documents, they can be copied anywhere, and it's impossible to trace where they are, and it's just not reversible. As you can see on the next slide, the next example I chose, the company is called Gunnebo, which is a Swedish security firm. Due to an unknown reason yet, it's still being investigated. As well, 38,000 documents from the security company leaked out, and it had sensitive customer information, including the Swedish parliament and drawings of bank vaults that are completely leaked out to the public. And the question here as well, talking about documents, how many of these 38,000 documents did the company actually know contain sensitive information? Obviously, once it leaks out, you know, because now they can obviously define, okay, it contained customer information. But before the leak, did the company actually know how much of this information was sensitive, how many documents contained this information? This brings me to my last and probably the biggest example that lately happened. Intel, obviously a famous company with more than 10,000 employees. Also on August 6th this year, due to an unknown reason, 20 gigabytes of internal documents containing a lot of confidential and restricted secret data about new products, new initiatives leaked and were uploaded to a sharing site. And we have the same problem there again. They're uploading to a sharing site, and you have no control over who's actually seeing it and can reverse anything of that, because the documents, once they're out, they're just out. On all these three examples, as you could see, the estimated cost has not yet been disclosed, because this usually takes time, because there's not an easy way to see, okay, we have X amount of documents leaking out, how much money does it actually cost our company? How the immediate financial impact? So here at Cryptos, data classification and documents is all we talk about. So how can we actually calculate the cost of a breach? What's the best way to calculate it? So next slide, please. And can skip that one as well, please. Okay, so we created here at Cryptos a small calculator. It's a pretty simple calculator, based on the statistics of the classification results we have of classifying more than 150 million documents. And we created this little calculator to estimate the cost of a possible breach using pretty simple math, and obviously the results that we obtained through our work here at Cryptos. So I'd like to share my screen real quick to actually give a quick demo on the way this calculator can be used on estimate the possible cause of one of these breaches, depending on the different industries. Let me share my screen real quick. All right. So once the screen is visible.
Yeah, we can see it. Go ahead.
Perfect, thank you. So we define 4 different industries right here where we have actually collected data by classifying documents. It's a little small to see here, but it's a banking, financial sector, insurance sector, automotive sector, and the healthcare sector. As an example, I'm going to choose the banking financial sector in the data we collected so far. We use the size of an organization and the number of documents per user to actually calculate the direct cost of the breach. I'm going to take an example and say a company has 1,000 users, 1,000 employees, I'm sorry to be specific about it. And the number of documents that every user maintains in his or her laptop in the cloud our reference here is 4.5 to 5,000 documents. This might seem a lot to you, but we've actually seen clients with 1 million documents containing at the in one machine. So our reference here is 4,500, 5,000. I'm gonna use the figure of 4,500 documents per user inside a company, and with simple math, obviously we get to 4.5 million documents here in total. So here comes in what we actually find out with our everyday work at Cryptos, having classified more than 150 million documents. And this obviously can fluctuate from company to company. That's why I invite you for a personal assessment and after this small presentation here to see on how this actually comes out in different companies. Our average is 26% has been rated as confidential, 23% restricted, 10% internal use, and 41% public. So this scales down to this amount of documents here for the distribution of these 4.5 million documents. And the potential cost here, we actually use the data from the report of the Ponemon Institute and IBM, called the Cost of Data Breach 2020. They state that every document that's been leaked out, and we use obviously only confidential and restricted, because if the other ones leak out, it's not such a big impact than with the classification. So they state that every document has a potential cost of $160. So if you take the amount of the example here, this sums up to $352.8 million. And there's another figure we're using there, because obviously this would be if everything would leak out to the public, which is usually not the case. So we're using here a figure which we pull from that report as well. The 6.1% is the exposure risk that actually the amount is exposed to leak out to the public. So if we take that 6.1% of these 352.8 million, we get to $21.5 million and an amount of a total of almost 360,000 documents. So this is the way we actually show, and it's pretty interesting figure on what, this is obviously not an exact figure, but this is the possible cost of a breach for any company. As I said before, this highly fluctuates between different sectors and between different companies. Now, if this caught your attention, which I hope it did, I'd like you to show only a few minutes on what a free assessment with data classification in Cryptos would look like. I'm going to turn back to the slides and start presenting here from my machine. At Cryptos, we classify millions of documents in an incredible short period of time. Hereby, it doesn't matter what size the company has on how many documents are lying in PC, in the cloud. We'd like to invite you for a free assessment to get an overview of your personal classification rate inside your company. So I'd like to give you a little snippet of what this free assessment result would look like. You can see here, there's the classification result from platforms. We don't only classify within Windows PCs or Windows Server. We also support the cloud, such as OneDrive, SharePoint, or Google Drive. And the way we detect and classify data is using 3 different artificial intelligence algorithms. One is to detect sensitive information based on its sensitivity level. The other one is detect personal data within documents, see what type of personal data is being inside the documents. And also, and it's obviously a really important part as well, any credit card or debit card numbers that are within any document that lie around these mentioned platforms here would be detected by our algorithms. So to show you a little on how this result would look like for cloud-related assessment, and the result here, it's OneDrive and SharePoint. So let's say we install our classification agent in 10 of your users inside your company. What you'd get out of this is the total amount of the classified documents and how many documents would be lying inside the one cloud and inside the other cloud. But that's obviously something that wouldn't give you the real benefit of it. But if you take a look at what we can show you here, we actually provide a distribution obtaining the detailed view of this different sensitivity levels of public, internal use, restricted, confidential, and how these classification results are distributed within your environment. We don't only limit it to cloud specific, but we can also get into the specific provider here, as you can see on how much the information with its respective distribution is inside OneDrive and inside SharePoint. So you get a little more detailed comparison there. And to dig a little deeper and give you a further overview of a lower level of sensitivity. So on this slide, you can actually determine what's the amount of personal data and what's the amount of debit credit card detected within the total documents classified, within the total data classified. So you can see 15% and here, 15% here is actually containing personal data or credit card data of the total data classified. The last thing I wanted to touch on is, what about a file-based detail view with its respective sensitivity level? So we do provide in the free assessment, we do provide an overview of the document formats, and the ones we provide with docx, Excel, PowerPoint, and PDF. And you can actually see the distribution of the sensitivity levels, confidential, restricted, internal use, and public, and the percentage it's distributed within the different file formats. That can be obviously really important for a company, and that's why we already provide that in the free assessment. So having said that, once again, thank you for your attention, and really like to take the advantage of participating in one of these free assessments with Cryptos, and also have further discussions about how Cryptos works and the way we classify our data. So if you're interested in the assessment, please send us an email at either assessment@cryptos.io or info@cryptos.io, and get some real info of your company and way data about your company and how sensitivity levels within the documents that lie in your environment. So feel free to contact us. And since you're a participant of today's webinar, you get this benefit of a free assessment, and we'd be happy as well to discuss any further follow-up discussions. We're happy to answer any technical questions or any other questions you might have. We're happy to assist you in whatever doubt you have. Thank you very much, and I'll hand it back over to Luigi.
Thank you both for this great presentation. As Christoph was mentioning, because you participated on the webinar, you will have access to a free assessment. We will share with you the email in case you want to send it later. And again, want to thank you for your participation, for taking time to understand what the Cryptos technology can do for your company in regards to cybersecurity. And if there are no further questions, we'll close it out, and we'll send this out to you later in an email. So thank you very much for your time, and hope you have a great day and stay safe for you and your families. Bye.
Thank you.